Hey, everybody, and welcome back or welcome to, for the first time, to Coach Blake's Breakdowns. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 10 Shadow Team recap, as well as dive into a little bit about how I set my draft board and the priorities as far as which positions I'm looking at. But let's just jump right into it and let's get to my team. So, like we went over last week, this is the setup for my team. Just how I organize everything, keep all my players intact and in check, and make sure I can follow them without having to scroll through just a long list of information. It kind of makes me feel more official. But as we go through, I'll talk again about just kind of the tiers and where people were last year, where players are looking to trending this year. Any of the little changes. There's been a couple little changes and some stuff to watch as we kind of get to the back half of the season. But here we go. Still, looking for a quarterback, waiting for Michael Pratt or Sam Hartman to get their opportunity. Just eyeing quarterback in the draft next year, as we do every year. But just we'll move on to running backs. Bijan Robinson still having an awesome year, still having that 91.6 PFF grade, still being in the 90s is awesome, especially with that 474 snaps. He's one of the higher snap counts on my team, as he is a full-time starter for the Falcons. Always good to see those first-round picks, especially those early first-round picks, those first, few picks of the draft pan out. Kenny McIntosh, still playing solid when he gets time, but didn't really get that much this week. Still only has 13 snaps on the season. Not really worried about RB2. Kind of a fun draft to look at running back though, so definitely keeping that in the back of my mind. Would be fun to have a nice 1-2 punch back there. Wide receiver room is still looking really solid. Jalen Coker finally jumped Troy Franklin and into that wide receiver 3 spot. Just as far as snap counts go, he's up to 223 snaps, while Troy Franklin's only at 204, which is fine by me because Jalen Coker has the better PFF grade anyway. So Jackson Smith-Njigba still trending well, still looks to be an average to above average player with that 72.6 PFF grade. That always feels great to have these, again, first-round picks in Malik Neighbors and JSN to be in that 70 to 80 range, especially when they're getting a full workload of snaps. So still feel good about my wide receiver 1 and 2. And then, Jalen Coker bringing up the back end as a UDFA, 223 snaps on the season. Just so always good to have a UDFA rookie make an impact like this. But then, Troy Franklin kind of falling off. So again, in my mind, just gonna flip Troy Franklin and Jalen Coker and wipe my hands of that one. But wide receiver room still looking very solid. Still have 4 pretty solid contributors. As you can see, I have the green kind of markings on the right side. When they're highlighted green, that just means they're receiving what I consider to be, and what the league that I participate in considers to be, starting level volume as far as their snaps go. So they need to be averaging, 4 wide receivers need to be averaging 30 plus snaps per game to be kind of considered a starting level wide receiver. So these guys down here with 20 are still in the rotational category, because 20 plus is still considered rotational wide receiver, if I remember that correctly. Could be 25, actually, now that I think about it. I'll have to look into that. But 20 is still very good, especially as a rotational guy. So my 3rd wide receiver and my 4th wide receiver being over 20 snaps per game still feels really good. Then down to Tucker Kraft, 51.5 snaps a game is crazy. I wish he had a higher grade, but I'm fine with a solid 61.9 PFF grade over 516 snaps on the year. Looks good. 3rd round contributor. I mean, he's feeling in great as a starter. I'm not really looking to, really bolster that room this early on in my build, as this is only my 2nd season. But, I'm really, really glad that I found a solid tight end to be there that I can feel comfortable with kind of just leaving in there unless something falls into my lap in the draft. And then, of course, our O-line room still has a long ways to go. Filled a lot of bodies in there over the last couple drafts, but just not seeing a lot of production. Bo Limmer, the guy that we have slated as a starter, he's averaging that 49 snaps per game. It's just, he's not. He lost his job this week from the looks of it, watching the game. Monday Night Football, I believe that one was, against the Dolphins. 6th rounder, so didn't expect him, to come in and be a huge starter. I know there's been a lot of turmoil, especially on the interior offensive line for the Rams, but was really hoping he was going to be able to hold on to that spot. But it seems they've thrown Jonah Jackson back into that role. I know a lot of people are talking about if it's going to be Steve Avila or Jonah Jackson at center, and if Jonah Jackson's playing center because he just didn't want to play left guard or didn't look good at that spot. In my opinion, I hope Steve Avila stays at left guard, and I hope Bo Limmer can win the job and beat Jonah Jackson out for that job, even if it is just over the offseason. I still feel good about him trying to slide into that role. He didn't look great, as you can see, by under a sub 60 PFF grade. It's not awesome. But again, rookie, I got him in the 6th round. Still looking. I'm hoping he can trend positive. We're looking forward to the future, hoping he can kind of win that job and then work his way into being a quality starter. But overall, that's kind of how the offense looks. You can see there's kind of some snaps spread out across my offensive line outside of Bo Limmer. You got Chandler Zavala, who, the Panthers brought in a lot of free agent help, especially on the interior offensive line. So I didn't really expect him to do a lot this year. He's a early day three guy, but if he doesn't pan out, he doesn't pan out. He's looked, again, solid in those 106 snaps with a 61.5 grade, but you would like to see more out of him. Then Warren McClendon, another guy that I would like to see get more run with the Rams, but I just don't see kind of how they fit him in at this point. So yeah, overall, we need quarterback help first and foremost. Everyone, that's considered one of the most important positions, if not the most important position on your team. But outside of that, really looking for some offensive line help as far as the offense goes. And again, if we get a tight end that falls into our lap that we really like, there's a couple that I really like in this next draft that I hope kind of slide down. We can grab a little later on. Definitely going to take those shots, but not really looking to go get one, especially early on, with how the team's laid out right now. But onto the defense, let's talk through how we're looking over here. Let's see if we can condense this down a little bit so we can see those snaps. No, they're not going to let us. There we go. But here we go. So we got, of course, Tuli Tuipulotu, one of our stars on the defense, if not able to be considered the star of our defense anymore, with some of these younger guys stepping up. But Tuli, always looking great. Round 2 guy, one of my best players at the team. I think he was the best player on my team last year. 65.4 PFF grade through almost 400 snaps on the year. Not great. His usage has been a little bit weird in LA with the new regime coming in. I think he's still settled into a pretty solid role. Obviously, he has 39.6 snaps. He's averaging per week. Again, not per game. I know I said that earlier. This is per week of the season. So I'm still considered a starter, still grading out decently well. Would like to see more out of him, especially as he was an above average player last year. It seems he's regressed a little bit in year 2. But again, as you can see across the rest of my defensive line, he's getting the most run, and he's, grading decently well outside of some of these defensive tackles that I have running. So still excited for Tuli. Would like to see him bump up at the end of the season as he finishes out. He has a good matchup against the Bengals this week. I think he'll be able to have some fun. Hopefully he's able to get a pretty solid grade. Adetomiwa Adebawore, 134 snaps, 56.9. Defensive interior is not looking great for my team. Definitely something that we're focusing on in this upcoming draft, as we just really feels like we need to turn over a lot of guys in this room if they're not going to get more run. A guy like Evan Anderson's a great example. He only has 61 snaps on the year, but he's graded out very well. He has that 79.4 grade through those 60 snaps. We talked about last week how he got signed to the 49ers 53-man roster, which is awesome. I'm glad to see that he's making that progress, especially as a 7th-round rookie. But I would love to see him get some more run. Him and Jalen Redmond for the Vikings are kind of floating back and forth as far as who's getting more snaps. Last week, Jalen Redmond was the guy. This week, Evan Anderson, kind of got that little bump back over him. But they're both grading out relatively well, and I'd like to see them get more run because they are grading out well. But I think they have more specific usages, and I think that's what keeps them on the sideline opposed to on the field. But hopefully they're able to create enough chaos out there and have a big enough impact where they can get more run. Again, both still young guys. Jalen Redmond, a 2nd-year guy. Evan Anderson, again, rookie 7th-round guy. Jalen Redmond, the UDFA. Again, just let's hope for. We're hoping, but we're definitely targeting defensive interior in this draft class, especially with the talent that's in there this coming spring. Austin Booker, 176 snaps, grading out at 57.4. Not great, but could be worse, especially for a round 4 rookie, day 3 rookie. His snap counts have slowly been increasing week over week. He seems to be performing well as of late. I know he's kind of been inconsistent, but what can you expect out of a rookie, especially a day 3 guy? I still have really high hopes for him. I really loved his profile coming out. I'm really excited to see what he's able to do. And again, I'm glad that he's getting more run. I know there's been a lot going on in Chicago, and hopefully he can just wiggle his way into some more playing time. But I still feel good. I feel good about this edge room. I really like Adisa Isaac. He's in a Ravens room that's really hard to get snaps in. Tui Pelotu again, kind of just he's getting the snaps that we want. We just want to see him perform a little bit better. And then you have Evan Anderson, Jalen Redmond that we just want to see get more run, as well as Austin Booker and Adisa Isaac, Andre Carter and Gabriel Murphy. I'm honestly planning on just getting turned over in the next year or two. They're not getting any action, and they're just tweener players that I just don't know if they're going to be able to find a spot, but we'll see. Onto the linebacker room. Ivan Pace, as we all know, he's been the linebacker one in the room since last year. He's averaging that 31.8 snaps per week. He's grading out a 61.3, which isn't great. And again, is a little bit regression, just like we saw out of Tuli. Really solid player, high-level player last year as a rookie, but kind of regressed in year two. But day three guy, late day three guy, actually a UDFA in the real world. So obviously you can't expect too much out of him. He's overperformed what his draft stock was as far as where he got picked. However, with his role on my team at this point, would like to see him kind of get back to that playing level. But I know he's had some injuries. He had a weird drop in snap count this week. He was like sub 25 snaps this week, if I remember right, which is super strange. And Peyton Wilson has also had a weird drop in snap count this week. They both are. Peyton Wilson had kind of worked his way into a starting role with the Steelers, and Ivan Pace has been a starter, if not a high volume rotational guy for the Vikings. So kind of a weird week for both of them, but Peyton Wilson's been working his way up to that 30 number or 25 number that we're looking for with these linebackers. And I expect both of them by the end of the season to qualify as starters, which earns them a tier grade going into next year. So I know Peyton Wilson's a rookie, even though I don't know why that looks weird. Anyway, I know Peyton Wilson's a rookie, but he does seem to be earning a significant role in Pittsburgh, and I'm excited to see what he's able to do. He's obviously grading out better than Ivan Pace right now, though he has 68 less snaps or 70 less snaps if I can do math. But yeah, overall, I'm really happy with the linebacker room right now, especially with guys in this either rookie year, second year. Really looking forward to what this room is going to be able to turn into. Dallas Gant and Cam Jones are two guys I really liked, especially Dallas Gant. Big fan. Dallas Gant was excited that he landed in Minnesota, but just hasn't been able to find room on the field for him. Again, a lot of guys on that Vikings defense, to compete with, a lot of great talent there, especially with the complex defense they run. I wouldn't be surprised to see Dallas Gant kind of get some more run going into next year and the year after as he gets to the end of his rookie deal. But really looking forward to see what he's going to be able to do. I'm not looking to move on from him quite yet, like I am with Andre Carter and Gabriel Murphy. Into the defensive back room, though, let's talk about Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, who are, really blowing it out of the water, as well as Malik Neighbors. These guys are really the bulk of the strength of my rookie class. Again, 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick. 2 of those guys being on my defense in the defensive backfield. It's good to see those guys pan out. I was really worried about Cooper DeJean early on. He wasn't really getting a lot of run, but as we're seeing, he's now hit the threshold where he can be considered a rotational guy. He's not at that starter level yet as far as the defensive back's concerned, but he's over that 25 snap mark, which makes him a rotational guy. But he's been getting a significant amount of snaps lately, and I do think he'll be over that 30 mark by the time we get to the end of the season. I think him and Quinyon are going to be solid pieces for that Philadelphia defensive backfield. And as you can see, they're grading out well. I'd love to see Cooper DeJean kind of take over as CB1 for me, but I know he's playing more slot corner, so I'm not opposed to having a high-level slot guy in Cooper DeJean with that 83.6 grade, and Quinyon Mitchell holding down the perimeter at the 70.4 over 520 snaps throughout the year so far. But just two guys I feel like great hits in early rounds. It's always good to, hit on those early picks. I know you're, supposed to hit on those guys. Those guys are supposed to pan out for you. That's why they were early round picks. But we all know those guys can bust, and it's always just good to make sure you're hitting on those guys. And it's always fun, especially when they're on the same team playing with each other. So, again, feel good about kind of the top end of this defensive back room. Cam Smith's actually been getting some more run lately. Didn't really see any action last season. Hadn't seen much in the first half of the season this year. But he started to, start working in more into the rotation. We'll see what happens with him throughout the rest of the season. Would love to see him get some more run. Again, I really liked his profile coming out last year, but just hasn't been able to find his way onto the field in Miami. So hopefully he's able to work out. Mekhi Garner, probably going to be a guy that I'm looking to replace. He was a UDFA, but I don't believe he's on a team right now. I believe he's just a free agent on the market. No one really seems interested in picking him up. Eli Ricks got limited snaps at the end of the season last year with the Eagles, but hasn't seen any action this year. We'll kind of see. This is kind of where the point in the season, I think it was around week 11, week 12 last year, we started getting some more run. So we'll see if that's able to happen again this year. But again, another guy I'm probably looking to replace over the long term, depending on what the Eagles do with their defensive backfield. I know they have some guys that are a little bit older, though they brought in a couple of these younger guys. So maybe they're looking to turn over that room, and Eli's going to be able to find his way onto the field. Dwight McGlothern's a guy that I really like the upside of, and I'm excited to see if he's able to find his way onto the field, especially with this Vikings defense that seems to perform very well. So I'm looking to keep Eli Ricks and Dwight McGlothern, but also, kind of looking to move on from guys like, Mekhi Garner, who just aren't in the league anymore or on the back end of rosters, who I worry about even making it on the roster next season. And then continue on the defensive backfield. Let's get to the safety room. Antonio Johnson's been the snap count leader by a wide margin with 486 snaps on the season. But as you can see, not performing great in those snaps. Fifth round guy, day 3 guy, again in his second year, just not performing up to expectations, but that's okay because he's getting that run, which means he has the trust of the coaching staff. So these young guys that are able to get a lot of snaps, even though they might not perform great, it shows that they're willing to still put them out onto the field. I know he's been kind of up and down as far as there's some games he'll get very limited snaps, and some games he's getting a lot of run. It's just kind of feeling out and making sure they can get him in the right role. So I do feel confident about the future for him moving forward, just because it feels like that coaching staff's willing to put him out in the field. But again, it's a Jaguars team that hasn't performed great. So hopefully they're not looking to just replace him too soon, as he is only in his second season. I'm not necessarily worried about that, but just throwing it out there. We'd like to see him perform better, obviously. Hopefully we can get closer to that 60 mark by the end of the season, but love to see the snap count. That means he's scoring for me in the league, so I'll take that all day. Brandon Joseph's a guy for the Lions that's getting rotational snaps, gets a lot more runs some weeks than others. It feels like they kind of they have a 3 safety set with Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, and Brandon Joseph that they just rotate through. Brian Branch obviously being the main guy they roll out there, but Brandon Joseph able to get some really high volume of snaps every now and then, but also has some weeks where he's getting single digits, if any, snaps. So I'd like to see him work onto the field. Another UDFA guy, though. The fact that he's got 170 snaps in the season in his second season feels pretty good. Hoping to see him work into a bigger role. And I'm still waiting to see Jaden Hicks figure it out. I don't know why he's not getting run. He's only got 54 snaps, but over those 54 snaps, he has an 80.1 PFF grade, which feels like a guy you'd like to get in there. I know he's a day 3 guy, but his guy actually had really high on my board relatively, especially for a day 3 guy. Really want to see him pan out. Was really excited for him coming out, but just isn't getting the run in Kansas City. I know it's a great team, obviously having a lot of success this season, but would like to see him, find more opportunity. I don't know what it's going to take to get him out on the field, and we'll see how this offseason goes. And we'll talk about that as the season starts winding down, as far as how my guys are looking relative to their teams and their team's team building strategies and what they're looking to do moving forward and what moves they're most likely going to make when it comes to free agency or even the draft. But that's where we're sitting after week 10. And again, as we always remember, I do have Austin McNamara, who is not on a football team right now. I kick myself every day for picking up a punter. He was only a UDFA, so didn't really lose too much. But as I only get 8 UDFAs out of my 22 players a year, it's hard to have a guy that just comes in and doesn't win a job and is off a team, during camp or after camp and isn't able to find another spot to land. So we'll see what the future holds for him, but just not going to hold my breath on that one. But that's kind of where we're at after 10 NFL weeks, 10 weeks of the NFL season, I should say. And again, kind of these numbers on the right side where they're highlighted in green, that's their snap count per week, just to make sure they're qualifying as a starter or a rotational player. And that's all dependent on kind of the snap counts we've set forth in the league that I participate in, which we'll definitely be talking about at some point as the season winds down, just so I can make sure we're all aware of kind of the end goal of what we're trying to do with the shadow teams. I know we're always trying to get just all these guys in here that are just all stars. We want to get, 22 all pros out here on our 53-man roster, but there's a scoring system that kind of helps you gauge where your team's at, especially when you're in a league we actually have a number of players in the league this year, which is awesome. Always looking to grow as well. It helps you kind of gauge your drafting ability with some other people and see how well you're doing or they're doing. I'm way too competitive with it, so I try not to get too involved, especially since I don't have a quarterback, and that's one of the most valuable positions you can have on your team. But as we're talking about value, let's move on to how I kind of look at the draft from a shadow team perspective. Obviously, had to hide my preliminary draft board that I've been working on, but I input that into here and I reorder it based on this criteria. But just to kind of run through what you're looking at right now, is this just kind of the formula, I guess you could say, that I have set up to organize my draft board, because I do build my big board out just based on how I feel about players in general, just as a general scouting big board and players that I like and don't like and whatnot, from 1 through whatever. But then I import it into this sheet for my shadow team specifically, and I use this criteria to help me decide how I should prioritize these players based on obviously how I like them initially, where they are at on my big board, but then also my team needs and kind of the value that goes along with that. And so this value column is the positional value assigned to each position. That really comes into play when we're talking about scoring in the shadow league or shadow team league. It's a format that we have. Your score per week per player is the PFF grade multiplied by their positional value. So essentially, you're getting these players, the positional value is the max amount of points they can score per week, and then the PFF grade is almost used as a percentage of those points. So a quarterback can score a maximum of 10.68 points per week, depending on their PFF grade, and then their PFF grade gives them a percentage of that. So if they get like a 50 PFF grade, they're going to get 5.34 points for the week. And then as you can see the value as it goes, and I have it more organized on the right, maybe not. I think, yeah, it should be organized in order. A positional value on the right just kind of help me see. This just helps me see where all the players on my team kind of fall into, what rooms I'm a little heavier in. Am I covering my bases as I'm still early on in the process? Do I have enough bodies in the room to account for the value that I need? But speaking of quality of player, the quality category is the big one that I added this year as I kind of shifted my focus from just filling out a roster, a 53-man team, to trying to improve some of my rooms. So how I calculate quality is based on that sheet that we were just in, obviously this one, I go through and we talk about, we don't talk about, I have a formula built out where it goes through and says, okay, how many of these players are meeting? I actually set it to 20. So how many of these players are getting 20 snaps or more per week in the NFL? And then out of those players that are getting in that room that are getting 20 snaps or more, how many of them are getting a 60 or higher PFF grade? Because obviously those are going to be your more quality or solid average players. That 60 plus group, that 60 is considered an average starter, I think, in terms of PFF grading. At least that's what I've been told. That's how I interpret it. So we're looking for average starters, so that's 60 PFF grade, that are getting that 20 or more snaps. And I know it's a little lower than the 25 to 30 that we talked about per position, to qualify as a rotational piece or a starter. But I figured 20 is a pretty good baseline, especially early on, if these guys are getting run, or just if you're hitting that 20 mark, you're usually considered a rotational guy on your team. So actually pretty far beyond that. But early on, I wanted to put that bar a little bit lower. As this team grows and as we get into future years, obviously that number will come up, because we're looking for guys that can be starters, and that'll be how we determine the quality of the room. But right now, in year 2, we're looking for guys that are fine on the field. Are they able to get on the field? If you're getting 20 snaps a game, 20 snaps per week in the NFL, then you're pretty good for my team personally. So we're going to consider you a quality player as far as snap count goes, and then we'll look at your PFF grade. But essentially, we're going to look at how many players in the room, again, are getting 20 plus snaps. How many of those players that are getting 20 plus snaps are grading a 60 or above, and then we're going to divide that by the number of players at that position. And then that's what's going to give us this percentage as far as what the quality is. And so as you can see, the priority list, the priority order is really organized by quality of the room and then value. Because obviously, if we have a higher value position that we need more people, especially higher quality players to score more points per week, so we can win our group in the league. We're going to need high quality players that are high value positions. So obviously, quarterback's going to be our number one priority because we don't have a quarterback that's even playing right now. So that's going to be a 0% out of the gate. And that is the highest value position that is on the table. So that's obviously number one priority because you have the 0 and the high value. And then as you can see, edge is actually the wide receiver and edge are 2 and 3 as far as value goes. But as we've talked about, the wide receiver room looks pretty solid. We have that 50% quality in there because we do have 3 guys that are getting 20 snaps or more per week that are grading over a 60 PFF grade out of the 6 wide receivers we have in the room. So that one's going to drop down the priority list. And then edge, we have that 20%, which again isn't great. We have 5 guys in there. That means a 1 guy in there. Obviously, Thule, I believe, is scoring over that 60. Yep. And he's getting over 20 snaps per week. So I'm a little sick. So that's, it's going to drop a little bit because it is that 20%. But it's still going to be a little high because that's just not good enough for a position of that value. But what we're looking at coming into this next season is we're looking at, QB, we're looking at defensive interior, we're looking at offensive tackle. Those are all very high value positions. And then we're looking at interior offensive line as well because we just have no one contributing there. And that's almost 4 points a week per player we could get. I do believe center is actually scored a little bit lower, but we'll talk about that at a later date. But yeah, we're looking offensive line in general, and we're looking defensive interior and quarterback, which is again like what we talked about when we were going through the team. Not really looking to get more DBs. We got 2 guys that are contributing well early on. We got Cam Smith that seems to be pushing for a role. We got Antonio Johnson who isn't playing great, but he's getting those snaps and he's still scoring for us. So we'll take that as of right now, especially compared to some of these other positions. And then Brandon Joseph, who's pushing for reps, is not that 20 mark, but he's really close. So he'll, even drop that position a little bit lower as we get there if he can get to that 60 mark as far as PFF grade goes. But defensive backfield looking fine. Linebackers, we're looking really good. We're 50% because we do have 4 linebackers, but the 2 guys we have in there doing great. So I'm not really concerned about that. Defensive line, we talked about it being a weakness. Only have 1 guy that's really contributing consistently for us there. And then obviously we talked about with the offense situation, we have no quarterback, which is a problem. That's why it's number 1 priority. And then we really only have 1 offensive lineman that's contributing relatively regularly for us. But as we talked about, he's on the verge of losing his job if he hasn't already lost his job or, won his job for a little bit, but didn't really have it for the long term. So just need some offensive line contribution. But it's reflected here. So, but again, I'll bring in my draft board and then it'll kind of start sorting these out by priority. So as I bring the draft board in here, it reorganizes it for me based on the priority that is set here. And then also factoring in that value as well. But that's just a quick rundown of how I set my draft board, or I'm planning to set my draft board this spring. Thanks for coming, watch my video, listen to me rant about my shadow team. I'm really passionate about this. I love the draft. I love, being able to follow my picks and seeing if my process is good. If it's not good, how can we adjust that? I'm really looking forward to getting through these next couple drafts and being able to focus more on even the team building aspect of things. That's what I'm really excited for. The draft and evaluation is fun, and seeing these players hit is even more fun. But it's also super exciting to see once you start filling out the roster, you have to start making cuts, put guys on the practice squad, and start fixing rooms that you're struggling in. See if you can get everyone at the right level at the same time. Again, we got a strong running back, strong receiving room, in my opinion. But we have no offensive line, got an average tight end, and no quarterback. So this offense is really, really kind of at a crossroads here, where we want to make sure we can get the pieces around where we can have a successful offense, but we also don't want to waste the time we already have in there. So thanks again for coming and watching the video. I'll see you guys next week.